Former preschool teacher Lee Hughes has now admitted that she drowned her ex-boyfriend's 4-year-old daughter. Hughes is on trial at the High Court in Johannesburg, facing a count of murder and one of rape. She's told the court through her lawyer today that she was suffering from borderline personality disorder at the time of the little girl's killing, but maintains that she was fully aware of her actions. Hughes was arrested back in 2023 after the death of Nada-Jane Challita, who was found dead in a bathtub. The case has been postponed to the 7th of August for closing arguments.
Lee Hughes, the preschool teacher accused of killing Nada-Jane Challita in January 2023, submitted additional admissions to the High Court of South Africa Gauteng Division in Johannesburg, detailing that she intentionally drowned the deceased, who was 4 years of age at the time, following an emotionally charged argument with Mr. Challita, the deceased father. The case has been postponed to 7 August for supplementary arguments by the defense, and the state will respond should the need arise, as we had already presented our closing arguments, wherein we prayed to the court to reject Hughes' version, citing that she was the only person with and around the child at the time of her death, that she has shown no remorse and failed to take responsibility for her actions. As the state, we are convinced that we have proven our case beyond any reasonable doubt by placing evidence that, in our view, has passed judicial muster.
Well, let's speak further about today's confession by Hughes that she killed, in fact, she drowned the 4-year-old daughter of her boyfriend after they'd had a falling out with the father. Bring in human rights activist Siyabulela Jentile, who has spent many years, in fact, campaigning against women and child abuse in this country. Siyabulela, good to have you on the SABC. I mean, when you look at this story, I've just detailed some of the context. It doesn't get more shocking, right? A scorned lover killing the child of a former boyfriend.
Of course, good evening to you, Tembekile, and to the viewers at home. First, my heart goes out to the family of the little girl. No one deserves to bury their child, let alone under these gruesome circumstances, which are preventable in all honesty. But yes, we are wondering if this confession, by the way, is not a legal maneuvering, if it's really genuine, in for lack of a better word. But I mean, this whole thing confirms what we've been fearing as the public and the family, that this was actually premeditated. This was intentional murder of a little girl, and it's a very sad story, but we are following it very closely.
And it's interesting that Hughes says that she basically suffered at the time of this murder borderline personality disorder, but she was fully aware of what she was doing. Yet at the beginning of her trial, she was still pleading, or intended to plead, not guilty. What does that do then, if indeed, as you're suggesting, what she's trying to do here is a play at perhaps leniency from the court come sentencing?
No, we've seen this card being played several times. I mean, you'll remember one of the cases that we were following up very closely with the Not In My Name movement. I think it was called the Dross Rapist, where Nicholas Nino later pleaded or made an insanity plea. So we are happy that she started by saying that she was fully aware, and we are really hoping that she does not come back later and then they used this disorder as an excuse. Look, mental health is a very serious issue in our country, and it should be treated and taken with the seriousness that it deserves. However, it should not be used as a smokescreen to taking accountability. And so those are some of the things that we need to look at as we are deliberating on this case. But bottom line is that a child was murdered here, and the person has confessed, and now the law must take its course. We still have that issue of rape that is still coming, though. So this confession should not be taken as full or as though that this story or this case has ended. She must still account.
And Siyabulela, you mentioned rape. Yes, Hughes admitting today that she killed this little girl. She drowned her in a bathtub, but she says she did not rape her. So if she committed the murder and the child was raped, who do we then turn to for the truth about the sexual assault?
That's where the criminal justice system comes in now. That's the hard work that they need to do, and we are all supporting them. They need to then test the case. The case must be tested in the reputable court of law. They need to get to the root of what actually transpired. And if it means even the people close to the child, in fact, they should be questioned. They should, thorough investigation should be followed to understand what happened to the child.
Because it could be that the rapist is among the people who are on the outside, right? If she didn't do it.
Most definitely, and we know we've had cases similar to this one in South Africa. This is not a standalone case. This is not something that is new. It's very prevalent in our country, and so I don't want to start, throwing in names or suggesting that it could be someone close to her, or that, or maybe then I would mean that she did not do it. We don't know, me and you, from where we are right now, but we are saying that the criminal justice system must then make sure that they get to the bottom of this and tell us who did this to the child, but not forgetting that the child was still murdered by this Amber woman,
Hughes, yes.
Amber Hughes, by Amber Hughes, and for that she must still face the full might of the law.
And I want to ask you, as someone who spent many years advocating for an end to violence in this country, how do we even begin to contextualize South Africa's relationship with violence, especially directed towards vulnerable groups, among them children as young as Nada-Jane was?
Yeah, South Africa is generally a very violent country, and beginning to contextualize it has been one of our biggest challenges, because we've had some among us saying that our violence can be attributed to socio-economic issues. We've had some saying it's traditional issues, some attributing it to religion, to this and that. Bottom line is that we are a very violent country. We've got a very violent past. But be that as it may, I think the people who least deserve it is children. And cases like this one, a child was violated and even killed in a space where she was supposed to be most protected, which is home. Excuse me. So we really need to have this conversation as a country and say that how do we protect our little children? But that speaks to the criminal justice system. It speaks to what we do in our own spaces, in our homes, in our schools, because this woman is actually...
She's a preschool teacher.
She's a preschool teacher. And that says, do we vet them enough or adequately, the people who we have trusted with our children in these preschools? In our schools, we've had cases of rape, of murder, even in high schools, even in universities. And that is... with the work that we've been doing with the Not In My Name movement as well, has been looking at some of these things. But I want to mention that like currently now we've got dialogues that we are doing in the Eastern Cape, that are running in the Eastern Cape, specifically in Lusikisiki. For phase 2, we'll be going to Matatiele as well, following the Justice for Cwecwe case. And the people are saying that on the ground, that the criminal justice system continues to fail us, and that is some of the challenges that we are facing. I mean, you remember Tembegile, 2 or 3 days ago, NPA came out and saying they want to go to court because Omatoso, this and that, and we've got loopholes that we really need to look into as a country.
Right, thank you so much, Siyabulela Jentile. We spent many years working with Not In My Name, human rights activists, joining us on the SABC this evening as we talk about Lee Hughes admitting today that she killed the 4-year-old daughter of her former boyfriend.